Hello everyone and welcome! After a lot of custom work to convert this highly detailed 39 Chevy plastic model kit into a fully functional RC car, today is the day I finally get to drive it. It's been quite a process that I've covered in detail over the course of this series. Everything from installing these tiny electronics and suspension components to customizing this car's interior. But today it's finally time to paint and weather the body, and of course add all of the finishing touches to make it complete. As always, if you're new to this series and would like to catch up on the work that's been done, as well as learn more about this custom RC build, I have included a link to the playlist for this project below in the description. But with that said, let's dive back into this project and get this car finished up. I started by doing some sanding on the lower half of the body. In that prior video, I removed some of the imperfections present from the manufacturing process on the upper section, as well as sanded the entire outer surface to help with paint adhesion. There were only a few sections that needed some work, as otherwise the part looks great, with very minimal flash, mold lines, or any other imperfections. It's at this stage of the build that it's a good idea to test fit all of the parts that will be glued to the body to ensure they fit. For example, I noticed I needed to enlarge the hole for the fuel cap. It's better to make any modifications now than it would be after paint has been applied, since you run the risk of scratching it. Just like with the body earlier, I used a sharp hobby knife and some sandpaper to remove any imperfections present on parts like the bumpers. I'll either repaint or touch up any sections where the bare plastic is showing on these chrome parts with a chrome pen. After a quick wash, it's time to get all of these parts painted. I decided to try giving this car a weathered patina look, so I started by spraying some light, uneven coats of both aluminum silver and dark brown before applying a more uniform coat of matte black. Basically, the idea was to simply wet sand certain sections of the body to reveal the brown and silver paint below to look like rust and steel. This process is probably about as simple as adding patina gets. I didn't do any washes or add texture to the rust. Maybe for a future project I can experiment more with some weathering products, but being that this was my first proper attempt at a patina paint job, I think it came out looking pretty nice, as you can see, especially considering how easy it was to do. Of course, I used some reference photos to try and make the body look as authentic as I can, and I really wanted to concentrate on not making the wear look too uniform. You'll see there's sections on one side where I went heavier with the sanding, while other sections remained basically untouched. In addition to the sanding, I also added a few scrapes in some sections, sort of like what I saw in some of the reference photos. This model car not only has a great looking body, but also a very lifelike chassis, complete with a big block Chevy hiding that electric RC motor and a solid axle rear end with functional leaf springs. Because of that highly detailed chassis, I didn't want to forget about adding some detail to the bottom. Just like with the top side of the car, I don't want the bottom to look completely rotted out, just a bit of patina and surface rust in spots, along with some dirt, oil, and scrapes, similar to what you might expect to see on the underside of a car that's been driven quite a bit. Again, nothing special, just a little paint and some cheap pastels to sort of act like weathering powder. I'm sure you can get a very similar effect from some crayons or whatever you have on hand. Especially with that detailed chassis I've built, I think the underside of this car is going to look great once complete. There's tons of RC vehicles with awesome looking scale hardbodies. But when you can get the undercarriage to look just as lifelike, that just takes the vehicle to the next level. Of course, the body looks even better after adding a few details simply using some markers. Things like the weather stripping and the chrome around the front quarter windows. I was kind of on the fence about whether to go with a chrome pen or a silver Sharpie. I thought with the patina look I'm going for with this car, the slightly less shiny silver Sharpie would look better. Kind of hard to say though, and I'm not sure it really matters much, but regardless, I'm happy with the finished result. At this point, I'm ready to move on to installing some of the chrome parts. In some of the reference photos, I noticed how the bumpers would be tarnished and have some rust, scratches, or other imperfections. I decided to try and replicate that somewhat on the bumpers that I have on this car. I also did a black wash by watering down some black acrylic paint. As you'll soon see, it really helped improve the appearance of the grille, and it also really helped dull down the chrome wheels. After making the body have kind of a weathered, matte appearance, I really wanted to try and tone down the chrome wheels. Really, on any build, even one with shiny paint, sometimes the chrome wheels included with the plastic model kit look too shiny or almost toyish, so a black wash and some detail work can really help. I just did a couple of rounds of applying the paint and wiping it away, and it really doesn't show up the best on camera, but there's definitely a difference after dulling down that chrome. Not that it would really be that unusual to have bright, shiny, new-looking wheels on an otherwise patinaed body, but again, toning down the chrome on these wheels definitely made a difference and improved the overall look of the finished car. The assembly work continued by adding parts such as the lights. I'll give you a quick look at where the car is at right now, and I was really getting excited to see this thing finished. Again, the parts in this kit were really nicely molded, and everything went together just about perfectly. I primarily used super glue, as I do with many other projects, except as you'll see later on, there were some spots like the windows that I used a clear drying glue to secure them in place. Super glue on those clear parts can leave a haze, so be careful. I tend to go a bit heavier with the glue than I would if I was building a static model. From my experience, if you're building an RC body, even something that's not really going to get raced or bashed around, you really want to try and make every part as secure as possible, as it seems just rattling around on some uneven surfaces can eventually work some parts loose. Next, it was time to make those lights functional by installing some tiny Pico LEDs. As you may recall from a prior part of this series, I worked on modifying this kit so that these LEDs would fit into place on both the headlights and the taillights. The hard work was already done. It was just a matter of fitting them into place, soldering the wires, and gluing everything down. A little easier said than done, as these LEDs and wires are very tiny. As I'll talk about during the conclusion of this build, there were a few things that I'd do differently next time with regards to the lights, but for now they're in, and again, as discussed earlier in this build, there's plenty of room in the trunk for a separate battery to be used to power the lights. To make the wires that run underneath the body more discreet, I did go over them with a black paint pen. I guess getting those wires installed earlier on in the build would be better with regards to getting them weathered and blending in more, but it is what it is. At this point everything works, so it's time to move on to installing the interior. I decided to save myself a little work and just leave the carpet black rather than paint it gray like I initially planned. I don't think it'll make a huge difference either way. I carefully remounted the frame to the body. As you can see, everything fits together perfectly. Just a few final items to add, such as the side view mirror and the license plate. This waterslide decal sheet is almost 40 years old, just like the one included in that monogram Shelby GT350 that I built prior. I was impressed that those waterslide decals went on as well as they did despite their age. The only decal I was interested in for this project was the license plate, and it went on just fine. It slid right off the paper, seems to have good adhesion, very impressive. With these final details now in place, it's time to sit back and admire this awesome 1/24 scale RC39 Chevy Coupe. Right from the beginning, I had a goal for this project, and that was to transform this model kit into a fully functioning RC vehicle using only currently available STL files we've posted on our Patreon page. No custom designing parts, just use what we have already available, and I have to say I think I was definitely able to smash that goal with this car, both looking awesome and very scale from the Mustang 2 style double control arm front suspension to the solid axle with leaf spring rear end. And as you can see, the car also drives great. It's not fast, but it's very smooth even at lower speeds, which is really more desirable for these types of ultra scale RC builds. All in all, a very fun project with a great result in the end. What a fun little project. I think this is definitely going to remain as one of my favorite projects I've done on this channel for quite some time. Just a combination of a great model kit and those drivetrain and suspension parts that we have designed fit perfectly. Although a really basic patina paint job, and certainly not my specialty, I think it came out looking pretty nice. It's just one of those rare projects where it feels like everything went right. Are there some little nitpicks and things that I would do differently next time? Absolutely. The lights, both the headlights and the taillights, are something I think I could have done better. The headlights are really dim, while the taillights are maybe a little brighter than what would be ideal. Part of the issue too, and I know it probably doesn't show up great on camera, as you might recall, for the taillights I used some warm white LEDs and then just put some transparent red over top. It doesn't look bad. In fact, it actually looks a little bit better to my eyes than it does on the camera. But I think using red LEDs would have definitely been ideal. And then I would probably consider adding a resistor to try and get them a little bit more dim. In general, I prefer dimmer lights on a model build such as this, especially something that's replicating an older vehicle. To me, when you start adding super bright LEDs to a model, it just starts to take away more than it adds to the appearance. It can get to the point where the light is like shining through the plastic, or it's shining down into the wheel wells and other areas you don't really want it to. Now, of course, if you have something like a crawler that you intend to drive at night, you'll definitely want some super bright lights. But of course, this is just a model and scale realism is the goal. That's just my opinion though. Sometimes I think the super bright LEDs detract more than they add to the overall look of the vehicle. That said, the headlights on this car are definitely too dim. What I would do to try to correct this is, instead of placing the LED in the rear, I'd cut the part of the clear piece that extends back and just apply a little glue to the outer edge of the lens and put it in place, and then have that LED sitting closer to the lens. Aside from that though, the car drives really well. The suspension, it isn't perfect. As you could probably see, it's pretty close to being bottomed out in the rear, but you can definitely see the suspension move when it's going over bumps, which is pretty cool. That aside though, it's just about perfect. It's really hard to ask for more from a project like this. Of course, if you're interested in doing a similar project yourself, definitely check out the prior videos that I've posted in this series. All of the STL files for the parts that I used are posted over on our Patreon page, which will be linked below in the description. So I definitely want to do another highly detailed model to RC conversion just like this. Full interior, full engine bay, detailed undercarriage, tiny electronics. I had a lot of success with this GT350, which sort of served as a test bed. And of course, I've been able to sort of top that with this 39 Chevy build. I think the idea of only using STL files that we had already posted on Patreon to build this, essentially putting myself in the position of one of our Patreon members, was a cool premise. Basically somebody with access to a 3D printer, but doesn't want to design their own parts. With a little patience and some custom building, you can make it happen. But I'm wondering, should I do another project with the same premise of only using parts that we've already posted? Or should I do a custom project like this, but design new parts for it? I don't know, I think both could be very fun. Let me know what you'd like to see below in the comments. Either way, it'll be a lot of fun, and I hope you stick around to see what's next. But that's going to be all for today's video. Thank you all very much for watching, especially those of you who have been watching this series since the very beginning. I hope you all enjoyed watching this project as much as I enjoyed building it, and as always, I'll see you next time.